Welcome back to the Inspired Podcast, Tzvi Broker with Rabbi Rav Gerzi in season 2 of the podcast. It's been so exciting to start up again, and just having that last podcast intro made me realize how much I miss having these conversations with
Baruch
you.
Hashem.
So just before we start, we'd just like to thank our sponsor for today's podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by נחום ben Shlomo, Luli Nishmas, Shlomo ben Yosef, and 𝗀𝗃a bas Ya'akov. The late Mr. and Mrs. G and their neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen.
And please join us by sponsoring a podcast and enabling us to be able to reach out to a wider audience. Be in touch. Looking forward to sharing this 𝗀𝗃 together with you.
Amen.
And, all these introductions. Welcome to all of our amazing listeners around the world. It's been a while. I forgot all the people I need to welcome. Baruch Hashem, we're fortunate to have listeners all across different countries, including our Torah Anytime listeners. It's so exciting today, Rabbi Gerzi, I hinted in the intro, to start a conversation that I hope will continue to develop as time goes on. It's a topic which is being discussed a lot today. Some people make them feel fearful. Some people, they just pretend it's not happening. It's about the topic of AI taking over the world, or just the workplace. For now, we're going to talk about AI in the workplace.
And it's definitely a conversation that will carry on. There's a lot to say. Chazal, there's a lot to say. There's a lot of Gemaras, Midrashim, there's a lot to say on it. And we're going to play today. We're going to just entertain.
Just a topic. Hashem. And you know, whether or not you believe it can, or you believe it can't, one thing is clear. And this, I'm going to share my own personal experience. You know, being at a cashier, and I remember what it used to be. When I was a kid. I used to go to the cashier, and the person would be there and smile and say hello and interact. And I've been recently, at a cashier, and just having this experience with this person behind the desk and just scratching my head and thinking, did I really need that person there? I know the person was on their phone anyways and was not necessarily paying attention. Perhaps I could have done this better if there wouldn't have been someone there at all. And what's amazing is that if this was just something you've thought out for yourself for the last 5-10 years, it's a real question now. Because what's really being discussed is putting the workplace right under a microscope and saying, where do we need to have humans and where don't we need to have humans? Because if we don't need to have a human being here, so then why deal with the hassle, right, of moods and emotions and sick days, and having to have conversations? Just, AI, just get a bot, doesn't complain unless you program it to. You don't have to deal with the, sick days and taking off or vacations. It's great. It's just consistent. And in some situations, perhaps even does the job better. So really what's taking place, right, for those that know and for those that don't know, right, is really a conversation that's taking place behind closed doors of saying, when we're looking forward to the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, what are those jobs that are going to be taken over by technologies that can be more effective, for sure cheaper, right? And then this could make major changes in the way that we experience work. And for each one of us that may be involved in work to think, well, is my job AI proof? Right now, I'm not just competing against, the guy down the cubicle from me, but the computer that I'm using that I seem to love, maybe he's going to take my job. It's a funny question and a scary question at the same time. And what we want to open up a conversation over here is that one thing that is being brought to the forefront, and it's a fascinating philosophical question, is that what really makes us human? Meaning, now that somehow robotics and computers and technology may be able to take over certain tasks and perhaps even do it a lot better than any human being, even if you've gone to a top university. So the question is that, well, why do we need to have humans in the workplace? What do humans bring to the workplace? And if we're not upping our game and being human enough, well...
So I think this is it. I think this is the challenge. The challenge is we have to be more human.
It's a funny thing.
It's a funny thing to say. We have to be more human. Already in so many areas and elements of the workplace, AI is taking over. You mentioned the cashier. How many places do you go to today and there's a computer? There's a computer. In England, when I was with my parents, they get very frustrated because instead of giving somebody money, you're doing everything on the computer, and they get frustrated. They get upset. Let me speak to a human being. And it's obviously the level of sophistication with AI at the moment is still distinguishable to a certain degree with the human being. However, and it's only a couple of years, it's only a matter of years where, number one, will it be indistinguishable from certain aspects? And then the question is, what's next? But I think right now, I think the challenge is for the human being to be more human.
Right, which I think is a great topic for this time of year, as we're rolling into, this month of Tammuz, into the 3 weeks, where really the focus is really taking a look in terms of our relationships with other people and what does it mean to be a human being, right? As Rabbi likes to say, we're not just, what is it, brains on pogo sticks?
We're not just a brain on a stem.
We're not just a brain on a stem.
Well, that's the 𝗀𝗃𝗃. The 𝗀𝗃𝗃
if we were, then AI can do it better, right?
Exactly. If we're speaking about skills, if we're speaking about raw data and skills, the AI can modulate that a lot better than the human being can. But there's something with the human being that AI can't do, and we have to recognize and realize that. I think we're looking at, again, we've spoken about this before, maybe it's the soft skills. I don't know. It's a very, very, very big subject. But to start off just by speaking the soft skills of compassion, empathy.
Yeah, those are for sure the ones that I think that people are starting to say. And if we're going to look at hard skills like processing and information and problem solving, put up a human versus a computer wins.
Yeah, AI will.
Which is quite scary. It's scary to think about for certain professions. They're very much based off of problem solving, and then what's going to happen over there. But then, so then let's shoot back. Forget about hard skills. Let's go to soft skills. Let's talk about communication. Right, like you said, your parents didn't like communicating with a computer. I know I've had my experiences computing. I've had some experience, being on the back ends of these, these different chat formulas. So I have like a very good sense for smelling out bots. It's like, are you human? Like, are you human? And it could be frustrating. The question is that does being human mean that we can communicate better automatically than technology?
That's the big question. That's the big question. It seems to, it's interesting because as being a musician, when you are playing music, it's very fascinating because if you are playing and you're being accompanied by an electronic drum kit, a pre-programmed drum kit, what's really difficult, I find, is when you're playing, you naturally find yourself going out of time with this perfectly, timed drum kit. And I remember I was speaking to one of my teachers in music, and they pointed out something so beautiful. And they said like this, that it's the flaws within the timing of the musician's experience that keep you in time with another human being. That you become in sync, you work together, you play together in sync, so when you go slightly out, they go slightly out, and you're doing it together, so it's in time. When you're playing with some sort of robotic device, some sort of electronic device, it's so perfect, there's no room for the flaws. There's no room for those imperfections, which is very, very interesting. This is already 12, 13, 15, talking about, it's like 100 years ago already. This is when I was studying, maybe 25 years ago, when I was very much in the world of music. And this, it's interesting. I'm sure today AI will be able to, so to speak, there's an algorithm that will work with your imperfections. But the idea right now is still there, that it's the imperfections that give us that human touch on a certain respect. It's having the ability to misunderstand, maybe. It's having the ability to be empathetic, to be compassionate. And as we said, it's upping that game in what it is to be human being.
Right, but are you saying just looking at the example you said for music, I'm not a musician, but what it sounded like when you have two musicians that are playing, right, there's that which musician A is doing and musician B is doing, but there's something else which is going on in between that interaction that almost energetically is somehow enabling things to work. Then when you take human being and put it with something which is robotic, that
it's not there. It's not. You can have guitar. You can have two guitarists, a bassist, a drummer, and somehow they all keep in time and it works. The minute you can bring in an electronic device, I have found coming from a musician's experience, it becomes more difficult for some reason.
Right.
Because it's so perfect.
Right, interesting.
It is a very interesting experience as a musician.
Right, and I think if we think about it in the realm of communication, even before we get to the topic of AI, there's so many different models that have come out in terms of effective communication and scripts to say and different things that people need to say. And then there's the question of what's being said and then how is something being said. And often where things can go off in the realm of communication is where people are following a certain script of words what to say, right? But if there's something which is missing, maybe you want to call it the emotion behind it, the passion that's behind those words, right? So then something is lacking. Like something we've spoken about a lot in the last season, right? When we were speaking about workplace and about how to be able to be impactful, right? Was about start with why, right? Simon Sinek. Right, and over there, right, what we spoke about is the importance of a person being driven by their why. Right, so why does that make a difference if you're driven by your why? So, because if a person is doing something and he is aware of what his why is, and then he's saying it, even if he says the same words as somebody who's not driven by their why, that will make a difference in the power of communication because of the fact that the person who's saying it is being driven by something deeper. Now, what was that? If you break that down into a mechanic, it's like I don't know how to look at that.
I think it'll come down to the aspect of non-communicable. It's something we can't communicate, but we all know it.
Right.
It's something that's there behind the scenes.
Is that the soul?
Maybe that's a conversation I think that we'll have to have. Maybe it's called neshama. Maybe that's a human being. But there is something that we can't necessarily put our fingers on. There is something, I can't. Right now in this conversation I can't. Maybe somebody out there can. Maybe it is soul. Maybe it is neshama. But just to observe within this conversation, there seems to be something behind that's a driver that I can't necessarily put a word to, that I think is distinguishable between the human being and the AI.
Right. Well,
could be.
Well, I want to maybe suggest something that and if this is a bigger topic, we have to pick up another time. That's I understand. But one of the models that we've learned in Chabura, and we've had discussions around when we look at the humans, when we look at the human being and we look at the soul. Right, and once again, these are big topics, but we have the aspect of the ratzon of a person, right, connected to 𝗀𝗃, right, and there's the aspect of when something is being driven by the drive, right, by a person's ratzon, right, so that is somehow when a person is aligning that what he's doing and that what he's saying from a higher place, then it has more impact. When we're speaking consciously, right?
There needs to be a place of das, awareness, consciousness, and we're drawing down. We're being meishach. We're drawing down from Ein Sof through, from God's divine light, divine intelligence, through soul, through consciousness, into all our kishkas. Through
right, we have the capacity to do that. Yes. Or even if, let's say, for example, if a person's speaking about something that they have a passion about, or they're naturally interested in, right? That's connecting to a certain soul part of who they're in, and therefore when that person, I'm sure you've met people like this, or you yourself are like this, when you meet somebody that this person, he loves, he just loves food, he loves beef jerky, right? Or this person loves gardening. Like when he's speaking about it, it's not just he's speaking about it. There's something about him, there's like the essence of that person which is coming out through his communication that just is mesmerizing for the listener, right? And the question is that even if you have all the right words, you take all the scripts of that person who spoke with passion and give it over to a technology to say all the right words.
Will it come out the same?
Will it have that same impact?
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Right. Will it have that same impact? So perhaps the answer is yes. I would like to hope, because I would like to hope, and once again we'll see, that the answer is no. But what that does mean is that we need to become people that are speaking from that place.
We have to speak from a place of consciousness, and we have to be passionate about what we're passionate about. We have to mean what we say and say what we mean.
Right. Yeah, and the steps towards that is really, that stage beforehand of being self-aware, right? And knowing about what is it that we're going to say and where is that coming from. And then being able to inject that into our communication.
Okay.
I know
Nice.
there's a beautiful teaching that you've given over a few times about speech, right? I think in the name of Rabbi נחum, right, that speech is only something which is heard.
Speech is speech when it's heard.
When it's heard.
So a person could be like an animal making noise, and they are speaking, but it's really animal making noise because it's not being heard, it's not being received. When dibur is dibur when it's received by the makaba.
Right. Which
very, very dim nekudim. This is
which is part of this.
What
I
we're
think
saying.
that's part of it a little bit. That when we talk about what is speech, right, when we're taking into consideration how to be able to give over a message in a way that it's going to be received, that it's going to be understood. Passion and interest is one aspect. There are other aspects as well in terms of communication. But from a Torah perspective, what we're seeing is that we understood that not every word that's spoken equals speech.
Correct.
So
we've written in a number of the 𝗀𝗃𝗧'𝗦 we've spoken about this. Dibur with das. Dibur coming from a place of das is called dibur. Speech coming from a place of consciousness is called speech. Speech not coming from a place of consciousness is not called speech.
Right, and I know for myself, I'm saying, that when you have the opportunity to be able to meet people like this that are speaking that way, it experientially feels different.
Yes.
Hear from it. That's part of the reason why people are mesmerizing a certain tzaddikim, right? That they're speaking from a certain place. It just hits you, right? 𝗀𝗧his 𝗀𝗘𝗧 נכנסנו ללב, right? So דברים שיוצאים מ-AI נכנסים ל... I'm not sure. So if it's true, and please, especially those people in AI that are listening, please take us to school, send us a message. If we can't program AI with passion, innate passion,
very
with
interesting.
with this innate hearts like that it comes from the essence of what AI is, and then you compare that with a human being who is in a place of das, who is speaking consciously, who is self-aware, who is being able to draw down from that which I'm passionate about, who is able to give over that ratzon through the speech so that it's able to be heard. So then we do find a difference between a human being and AI. But if the way that we're communicating is we're not self-aware, we don't know we're just talking from the mouth, right? We're not aligned with who we are. We're not aware of what our interests and our passions are. We're just speaking. We're not considering the other person, feeling, is that other person going to hear what I'm going to say? So then perhaps our speech is equal to what AI is able to do, or perhaps worse, because AI can get it right, once you tell it all of its principles.
Nope. 𝗀𝗃𝗪. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Very good introduction to a conversation.
𝗬𝗪 Hashem. So what we stand up here today, right, as we embrace for the future, right, will AI take over your job? We don't know. But one thing is clear is that we need to recognize what does it mean to be a human being, right? And one aspect of being a human being is looking at the realm of communication, seeing how the Torah relates to communication. It's not just being what you say, but how it's being said, right? And taking on the challenge of becoming more self-aware, more passionate, speaking from a deeper place within ourselves, and 𝗀𝗪 Hashem, being able to make that impact, right, in all of our environments, in all of our conversations with people that we have.
Shkayach.